and welcome to Coffee Break Blogging, where you'll learn to grow and monetize your blog in short, tactical installments you can use right away. Now here's the next episode in our series. Hello and welcome back to Coffee Break Blogging, episode 157. This is actually the first episode of 2017. Also happens to be the first episode in about 6 months. And so this is the return of the podcast. So here's what we're going to be doing today, because it's probably been a while since you've heard from me, unless you're in the lab or you've been following the blog. This is going to be kind of an informal episode where I'm just going to kind of explain what's been going on the last 6 months. There's no really deep, big stories to it, but I think I do need to explain why the podcast disappeared, why we're bringing it back now, and what the general plan is here. Okay? So first of all, why did the podcast disappear? Well, we were going for, 2 episodes a week, and it was moving along fairly well, but here's what happened. At the end of the day, I run my business as a vehicle for my life. It's a lifestyle design type thing, okay? For those of you who have been following me for a while, you know that I do spend a lot of time going camping. I go out in the RV. That we went out this summer for about 5 weeks, went all the way up into Canada and everything, and traveled around, and we had a good old time. But basically, around all that, I started questioning everything that I was doing in the business. Not the business itself, because I absolutely love what I do, but I like to keep things simple. I like to not do things that I don't think are necessary. And one of the things, especially when I want to spend a lot of time out and about in the RV, is that a podcast can be a little bit of a drag, because especially when you're doing 2 episodes per week. Could I have done that while I'm out in the RV? Could I have podcasted from there? Yeah, I mean, I had my laptop and the whole thing. I could have done it. It would have sounded kind of crappy because I don't have my podcast set up with me, but I could have done it. But the other thing is, did I want to? The answer was certainly no, I didn't. And so I went through this phase where I was simplifying the business, and I simplified other things too. I made a change in my email list host. I moved over to drip email marketing from Entreport. Really, really happy with that change. I cut off a lot of fat and a lot of pieces of the business, and basically what I was trying to do is create a lean, mean machine that I can run the business the way that I want on my terms and be anywhere that I want and not have any undue pressure on myself. And that was the way that the podcast got cut. And here's the thing too, is that on top of all this, I did not really think that the podcast was ultimately adding a whole lot to the business. And it's, come to find out, I think I might have been wrong about that. And I'll get to that in just a minute. But I had various tracking links in place, like any good marketer, in order to try to determine what kind of marketing impact the podcast was having. And when I went and looked at those reports, it did not seem as if the 2 episode per week podcast that I was running was really adding all that much to the bottom line. I mean, that's the honest truth. And so when I looked at that, and then I combined that with my desire to simplify the business, to not have to be able to operate it on my schedule without those types of patterned, like, have to do's every single week, I should say, the podcast got cut. And that's essentially what happened. Now, here we are in 2017. Why am I here? Certainly the Blog Marketing Academy hasn't gone anywhere. I've been quite busy. In fact, I just wasn't podcasting. So why am I podcasting now? Well, let's go back to what I just told you about the tracking that I was doing. As it turns out, there are things that were happening because of the podcast in my business that I couldn't quantify. And a lot of that is because of the way podcasts work. I can give a call to action in a podcast, and I can run that through a tracking link, but many times people are not going to go through that exact URL unless it's something that they've never heard of before. What I came to find out, also by listening to people inside the lab, was that I had more members than I thought who had joined the lab because they got to know me via this very podcast. And yet, my numbers were not really showing that fact. And so what it came down to, and it might have been just some sloppiness on my part, it very well might have been. But what it came down to is that the podcast was having a bigger impact than I thought it was having. And the other thing is that I think the podcast, and this is probably the nature of the platform, has a bigger impact than people can measure, because it is a very indirect thing. I mean, when you have somebody sitting inside your earbuds for a certain amount of time and you're listening to their voice, you do get to know that person. And whether you take action on something that they're doing right then, or whether you do it in 1 or 2 or 3 months or longer, you never really know when that conversion might take place. In my business, I'm ultimately looking to get members into the Blog Monetization Lab, because that is where I can work with people to enable their transformation in this business. And of course, that is what ultimately raises my revenue, which is something that I'm looking to do, obviously. It basically just came down to the fact that there was this gray area, there was this fuzzy factor that the podcast was having this impact, and I didn't really see it. I didn't quantify it. I was getting told stories inside the lab group about how they found me on the podcast. I did a consultation with a lady who, joined the lab and wanted some more one-on-one helps. And so lab members had the ability to book that call with me, and we did. And she told me that she absolutely loved the podcast. And I was like, wow, well, this is really cool. I told her, well, what if I brought that back? And she was completely and totally thrilled. Now, it was more than one lady, but I had that feedback from many different people, and then it just got to the point where, like, okay, I think I got to do this. And that brings us to today. Here we are, and the podcast is back. Now, here's what's going to be different about this podcast. My original lifestyle design reasons for turning the podcast off have not gone anywhere. Right now I don't have any big travel plans, but come this summer, I most likely will. There might be some other things going on with my kids' schooling that might enable us to do even more. And basically, this is a business that I run for the purposes of helping other people, but ultimately for myself, it's for lifestyle design purposes. And if I have to force myself to be in this beautiful campground, out in Maine or something like that, and I have to record a podcast sitting there and dealing with the noise of my kids and blah, blah, blah. I just don't want to do all that. Okay. And so I'm going to continue this podcast, but I am going to reduce the frequency. Instead of it being twice a week, we're now going to drop this thing down to once a week, okay? I think it'll be completely and totally fine that way. It is going to continue to primarily be just me because there's just so many interview-style podcasts out there that I look at what I do here as something a little bit different. These podcasts tend to be very instructional. They tend to be very meaty. It's not the kind of podcast where I like to just go off and have a bunch of fluff, okay? And it's going to continue to do that, but we're going to drop it down to once a week, something that I can hopefully keep up with, or if I see my travel schedule jumping up, I can plan ahead and get a bunch of those episodes in the can for my trip. The other thing, too, is that I'm just going to loosen up my standards if I absolutely have to. And if I need to record a podcast from the road, you guys can go with me. I'll use my headset mic. It'll still sound okay. It just will be a little bit different, okay? So that's our plan for Coffee Break Blogging. Let me also talk a little bit about some upcoming plans here for 2017, because we've got a lot going on here, all right? First of all, let's talk about some of the training that's going to be coming into the lab in 2017. I've got the whole thing planned out through the entire year right now, and let me give you just a kind of a breakdown of what's coming up here. We're going to have a course on crafting your content marketing calendar. Another one, finally, because a lot of people have been asking for it, the Facebook ads blueprint. It's going to be my training on how to do Facebook ads. Now, on that one, it's going to be interesting because as I've been very open with my lab members, I know how to do Facebook ads, but I do not put myself in the expert camp. I mean, there are people out there who do Facebook ads. They live, eat, and breathe the damn things, and they're going to be a lot better at it than I am. But one of the things that I bring to the table when I do a lot of my teaching, aside from my experience doing this stuff, is that I know how to boil down more complicated things into simple step-by-step type things. And so that's what I'm going to bring to this topic, the Facebook ads blueprint. And of course, that's something that will probably be updated over time as new information comes along. And Facebook changes things constantly anyway, right? Now, after that, we're going to do an update to the blog post traffic plan. That's an action plan that's inside the lab right now, and it's going to get a full update because it definitely needs it. We're going to do another course on the blog SEO. It's going to be a WordPress blog SEO checklist. So that's going to be a point-by-point. Here's how to set up your blog for decent SEO, and then how to set up your content for decent SEO. But I'm going to keep SEO in perspective because some people just take their concerns about SEO way too far. I'm going to just lay out the simplicity of it and let people go from there. The next one is going to be crafting an offer that converts. We're all just going to be talking about how to put an offer on the table and sell it. Okay, the next one is going to be blog posts that convert. That's how to create actual content marketing. How do you write blog posts that will fuel your sales funnel? That's what we're going to be talking about there. After that, we're going to do one called the email newsletter blueprint. Now, inside the lab currently, I have an action plan on what I call the email follow-up engine, but it's essentially a training about autoresponders, automated email marketing. But all of us have emails that we send to our list that are not automated. We do broadcasts as well. And so this training, the email newsletter blueprint, is going to be how to actually do the broadcast portion of your email marketing and some strategies that you can use to keep the funnel going. Okay. After that, we're going to go into one called the business debug. This is going to be a little bit different than some of the other stuff because it's going to be primarily to people in the lab who have businesses that are already generating some revenue, but it might not be a lot of revenue, and that's really the point, because we're going to take an existing business and we're going to do a point-by-point investigation and analysis on why is the business not performing up to the standards that you want. And we've all experienced that. I've certainly experienced it where my business is going fine, but then there's been those periods in my past where I'm like, I guess I shouldn't complain here, but I wish this business was doing better. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to bring into the business debug. It's going to be more of an executive level thing. Okay. Right after that, we're going to kind of continue the theme with something called the online business executive plan. This is going to be an executive look at the structure of an online business and some things about running it. Okay, this is going to be very different because it's not going to be real tactical in terms of here's how you get more sales, blah, blah, blah. This is going to be more of a bird's eye view of the whole thing. Okay. After that, we're going to do a course called the blog retargeting plan, which is how to set up retargeting funnels based on your blog and have the whole thing kind of work as a nice cohesive piece. It's really, really cool stuff. After that, the social media marketing plan. After that, the 90-day business startup plan, which is basically going to be an update of the current business building bootcamp. After that, conversion tweaks. This is going to be a course simply on going through an existing funnel and tweaking certain things, moving the levers around so that we can get more results out of it. And then lastly is the blog launch plan, which is how to go from idea to launching your blog from scratch. Okay, so that's a general, very informal breakdown of kind of what I have on the 2017 agenda. Okay. Now, another thing that I'm going to be adding to the lab for 2017 are what I call blueprints. Now, the blueprints are going to be a new effort. It's basically going to be a library of downloadable and printable checklists that guide people towards certain outcomes that they want in their business. Now, the idea behind this is that I have found in my own business life, and you've probably found the same thing, that very often when you have that feeling like, you don't really want to work, or you're kind of like you're screwing around on Facebook or something when you know you should be doing something more useful. Usually when I've had that happen with me and I analyze it, I realize that really what the problem was not that I'm being lazy, it's that I had some confusion on what I should be doing right then and there. Okay? And so from that realization for myself, I came up with the idea for the blueprints. The blueprints are going to be something where the blueprint will be focused on a particular project. That project could be, I'm going to launch a new blog, I'm going to set up a new funnel, I'm going to double my conversion rate, I'm going to create a lead magnet, and you would literally download the blueprint for that specific outcome, print it, and go through it. It's simply going to be an action checklist along with some guidance as to when you should be doing it. Not only in what order, but also when. And so you could look at, say, a blog launch plan and go, well, by day 7, I should have this, this, and this done. And you'll be able to fill in your own personal deadlines on these things. But the idea here is that if we don't schedule the action to make it something happen and say when we're going to get it done by, it probably will not happen. And so these blueprints are going to be a productivity tool for the lab members to get more things done. I'm really looking forward to this one because I think it's it's something that's sorely needed, actually. Okay. One last thing I want to mention here is some design changes, which by the time this episode hits the feed for the podcast, these changes should be live. The Blog Marketing Academy is going to be getting a pretty radical redesign. Now, it's not going to be like, holy crap, I've never seen anything like this before, because I like to keep the Blog Marketing Academy site pretty simple, actually. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing is simplifying it even more. So it isn't as if you're going to find big flashy graphics. In fact, it's going to go the other direction. We are going to make many different simplifications. The blog, I'm highly considering, and it's probably going to be official, is that we're going to get rid of the sidebar completely on the Blog Marketing Academy blog. That's a little bit of a radical move, but I think this is where the trend is going. And not only that, I think it'll be an interesting test, but I think that I can actually get more marketing or conversion impact with a piece of content by simply focusing people on the content and having calls to action within that content than putting a lot of distractions around it with sidebars, because most of us probably don't pay a whole lot of attention to blog sidebars anyway, okay? Another thing that we're going to be doing inside the lab is combining all the action plans and the courses together into one training library. There's no longer going to be that delineation. We're not even going to be calling these things action plans necessarily. I might change my mind on that. But that collapsible format that we've had inside the lab for a while is going to be going away. It's going to go to more of a traditional format. One of the reasons for that is just simply ease of use on multiple devices, because that collapsible format got to be a little unwieldy on the front end, and it was definitely unwieldy on the back end, us managing that thing. So the new system is going to be just a lot cleaner, okay? We're going to also be able to reduce plug-in load. So there's a lot of infrastructure changes going on behind the scenes in terms of the presentation of transcripts and downloads. It's going to be a lot more patterned so that it will always look the same. We're going to be getting rid of WP courseware. We're going to be getting rid of the action plan system. We're making many changes that you're probably not going to notice from the front end, just to reduce the overall footprint of the site in order to speed it up and make things easier to manage from our perspective, okay? Another thing is that lab members are now going to have their own push notification system, so that whenever there's some update for lab members specifically, I can send out a push notification specifically to lab members and not to everybody else, okay? Another thing is that you're going to be able to see training on the agenda before it actually is released. So, we've got a lot coming up for 2017. You're going to be able to see the listing for the next course, and it's going to be, it'll say coming soon on it, and you're always going to kind of know what's coming up there, whereas in the old system, we really didn't have that ability without some real geekery. And that's one of the reasons why I'm making some of these changes, is because it got to a point that the old system was so customized that I was the only one on that could add new capabilities to it. And one of the things that I really like to do in order to simplify my business is use third-party tools. You know, I know how to program stuff in PHP. I mean, I can hack this stuff up like crazy. But I don't want to in some cases because it means that when I want to add new capability to the site, it's just that much more difficult to do. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why we're actually switching away from the Genesis framework and going to another theme. There's just a lot happening there to simplify things. So all this comes together into a renewed focus for 2017. There's going to be a lot more focus on the lab. Not that there wasn't a lot of focus on the lab in 2016, but it's really going to hit another level in 2017. But we're starting out the year here making some pretty fundamental changes to the back end part of the lab so that all that content that I told you about is going to be a lot easier to produce, and there won't be so many weird pieces that we got to deal with behind the scenes. And it's just going to be good for everybody all around. And on top of all that, yes, we're bringing the podcast back, and it should be a lot of fun. Okay, so with all that said and done, you now have some idea as to why the podcast disappeared, why we're bringing it back now, and some of what's coming up for the new year with the Blog Monetization Lab. If you'd like to have more information about that lab, if you're not already a member yet, head on over to blogmarketingacademy.com/lab. We've probably, by the time this episode pops out, we've probably got a whole new page there that describes the lab and that takes into account all the changes that we've got. And I think that if you haven't been there in a while, head on over there, okay? With all that said and done, I'm going to stop talking now. I will see you next time on episode 158 of Coffee Break, where we're going to start jumping right into the instructional content yet again. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Coffee Break Blogging. If you like what you heard here today, we have something awesome we'd love to send you. It's called the Blog Conversion Guide, and it has 9 tweaks you can make to your blog in order to increase your conversion rate to get more opt-ins and sales. As one of our listeners, we'd love to give you access to this guide absolutely free. You can get your copy right now by going to coffeebreakblogging.com. Again, go to coffeebreakblogging.com to get your copy, and we'll see you next time.